Hello and welcome to the podcast. This is Ron's Amazing Stories. We have stories that should thrill you a little and chill you a little.
It's amazing.
What you'll hear are adventures sent in by you guys, classic stories from the pulp mags, and episodes from the golden age of radio. We have special segments like Ghost Stories with Sylvia.
That's amazing.
And Paranormal Expeditions.
I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
So settle in for the next hour and enjoy the show. One more thing. You just might want to prepare yourself to be taken away from today.
Another 5-minute mystery.
This 5-minute mystery is being brought to you by The Boy in the Basement, a truly remarkable story that is both amazing and true. Or is that truly amazing? Oh, I think both work. Anyway, you will hear that story coming up later in the podcast.
And so Johnny Raymond and his organ bring to a close the first program of his new radio series. This is your announcer, James Van Dorn, saying goodnight to you all.
Gentlemen, please. Quiet. That's better. Now, Mr. Horton, you're the director of this show. Would you tell me in your own words exactly what happened when Van Dorn died?
Well, Inspector, it was toward the end of the program. Van Dorn reached for the button to put the studio off the air, and then he just gasped and fell to the floor.
I see. Where were the rest of you when this happened?
Well, Taylor and I were in the control room, and Johnny Raymond was at the organ.
Are you Taylor?
That's right. I'm the studio engineer.
Did you notice anything peculiar during the program?
No, sir. I was in the control room most of the time.
Most of the time?
Well, except for the few minutes when I went into the studio to check the equipment just before going on the air.
You noticed nothing out of the ordinary?
No, sir.
How about you, Raymond?
Well, I was at the organ singing during the whole show.
And you didn't see anything either?
No. Mr. Van Dorn just pushed the button and then collapsed.
Let's take a look at this button. Which one was it, Mr. Raymond?
Well, I wouldn't know. Kind of new around here.
It's this black one here, Inspector. It puts the studio off the air when you... Oh!
Yeah, what happened, Mr. Horton?
Well, I don't know. Something pierced my finger.
Pierced your finger? Here, let me see.
Well,
what do you know about this?
What is that?
Hey, look here. A little pin sticking out of this button.
A pin?
Yes, and that's not all. You see this stain on the lower half of this pin? If my guess is right, this pin's been dipped in poison.
But what does it mean?
It means that Van Dorn didn't just die, but was murdered.
Murdered?
But how?
Simple. When Van Dorn went to switch the studio off the air, he stuck his finger on the pin and died immediately.
Incredible.
But that means anyone could have slipped in here and put that pin there.
Hey, you're wrong there, Mr. Horton. It means that one of you three put that pin there.
One of us?
Yes, Horton.
Who?
You, Mr. Taylor. You're under arrest for the murder of James Van Dorn.
How did the inspector know it was Taylor who murdered Van Dorn? We'll give you the solution in just a moment. But first...
Well, what do we have here?
I am going with some very fast-acting poison.
Incredibly fast. I did a little research on the subject, and there is nothing that can kill that fast.
So, you are saying that the 5-minute mystery folks took a little poetic license?
Not at all. I'm saying they out and out made stuff up to fit the needs of the story.
Isn't that what fiction does?
I guess so.
Then you have to label this one a success.
I guess you do.
And now for the solution.
I murdered Van Dorn. Why, you're crazy.
Am I? You said you went out to check all the equipment. If someone else had put the pin on that button, you would have noticed it.
Well, one of the others could...
No, Taylor. It couldn't have been Raymond or Horton. Raymond's new in the radio business and knew nothing about the board or anything else about this studio. Remember, this was his first radio show. If it had been Horton, he wouldn't have accidentally stuck his finger on it just now. No, Taylor. You were the only possible one. Now, you better get ready to march. We're going to headquarters.
Well, it would have been nice to know that this was Raymond's first show.
Agreed.
But the rest of it all makes sense.
Except for the poison.
Oh, is something bothering you there?
Yes, when Horton got stuck by the pin, why didn't he die instantly?
Now that is a very good point.
I thought so.
What's that you say?
Hello, and welcome to the podcast. Well, we have a boy in the basement.
Maybe you should let him...
Out? Actually, he's quite happy there and leaves when he wants. The story comes from our very own Sylvia Shults and is rather amazing. On the show, we talk to her about the story and even get some behind-the-scenes recordings.
Anything new?
Well, actually, we have a story from Sonia that is brand new and quite chilling.
I'll be the judge of that.
Okay, Sean, you do that. Now, to start all of this off, here comes this week's Audible. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. They have over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, computer, Kindle. Whatever you have, you can listen to Audible on it. So what am I listening to right now? Lincoln on the Verge, 13 Days to Washington by Ted Widmer. Lincoln on the Verge tells the dramatic story of America's greatest president discovering his own strength to save the republic. As a divided nation plunges into the deepest crisis in history, Abraham Lincoln boards a train for Washington and his own inauguration. An inauguration that Southerners have vowed to prevent. Now, does that sound a little bit familiar? Well, I have to be honest and say that I have not read this book. So what do you say we bring someone in who has to tell us more? Sylvia, are you there?
I sure am.
Sylvia, tell us about this book. I know that you're very excited about it.
I just devoured this book. This book is the most wonderful thing. It's a nonfiction book that reads with the excitement and passion of a novel, and I love that kind of book. Widmer writes with this rollicking prose that just carries the story forward, and it's like you're on the train with Lincoln as he's moving forward, moving to Washington. And I didn't know how important this train ride was. I had an idea, but Widmer really brings out the crucial nature of these 13 days. I read this story just 2 weeks after the Capitol riots, and reading it at that point in time was deeply surreal. The parallels are amazing. Widmer describes the tension in the Capitol. He describes the vice president being nervous that he was going to be mugged with the boxes of votes that he was carrying in order to certify Lincoln as the president-elect. There were people milling around outside the Capitol building getting all restive. There were policemen outside the Capitol that were just kind of letting the crowds go and not doing much about them. The parallels are absolutely stunning. So if you have any interest in history at all, I'm a big Civil War wonk, so I just ate this book up. But even if you have a passing interest in history or politics, it is well worth the read. It's a great book on its own, but as an example of history repeating itself, it is unparalleled. I highly recommend this book.
Okay, well, Sylvia, we have a short clip from the book. It's from the prologue. What are we going to hear here?
We're going to hear a meeting between Lincoln and a friend of his. This friend had been wandering the prairies of Kansas for several months, and Lincoln himself was crisscrossing the prairies of Kansas trying to drum up support for his anti-slavery agenda. And they just happened to cross paths, and this friend of his later accompanied Lincoln on the train for a while. It's just a description of how lanky and uncultured and unpresidential Lincoln was at the beginning of this train trip.
All right, well, let's play that clip.
The wind whips across the prairie in late November, hinting at the wrath of winter to come. In 1859, a German immigrant, Henry Villard, was fighting the cold as he drove his wagon east from Colorado, where he'd been living among gold prospectors. Villard had a long way to go, 650 miles in all, snaking along the Platte River through Nebraska and Kansas, as he made his way back toward the Missouri River, civilization. He survived by constantly gathering buffalo chips, or dried dung, which he burned to stay warm and cook his meals. At night he slept outdoors, covered with buffalo pelts. The prairie traveler is not particular about toilette, noted an English traveler after meeting a rough specimen in the same parts, who unsheathed a long knife he called his Arkansas toothpick. One night it snowed 18 inches, but Villard kept going, desperate to reach his destination before more storms came through. 30 miles west of St. Joseph, Missouri, Villard saw a distant speck on the immense horizon, growing larger, kicking up dust. As it came closer, the speck grew into a horse and buggy with 2 occupants. Surprisingly, Villard recognized one of the passengers. He had been in Illinois a year earlier during the excitement of the Lincoln-Douglas debates, and as the carriage approached, he began to make out the ungainly form of Abraham Lincoln himself, 400 miles west of where he normally could be found. Lincoln laughed when he realized that Villard had transformed himself into a full-fledged pioneer. A year earlier, Lincoln had known him as a clean-shaven reporter for the German-American press. Now he was almost unrecognizable beneath a luxuriant beard and all those buffalo pelts. For his part, Villard was amazed to encounter Lincoln, still smooth-faced, with nothing to protect him from the prairie wind except a short overcoat and no covering for his long legs. To make matters worse, he was heading directly into the rough weather Villard had put behind him. It was a frigid morning, and the wind blew in from the northwest, cuttingly, as Villard put it. Not far away in Leavenworth, the Missouri River was beginning to freeze as the thermometer plunged toward 0. Lincoln was already shivering in his exposed buggy, with no roof and a great distance still to go. But he was determined to continue, for he had a speaking engagement, and there could be no rest in the struggle to prevent the spread of slavery into these wide-open spaces. Villard offered one of his buffalo robes, which Lincoln accepted gratefully. After a short chat, they separated, 2 ships passing in opposite directions. Travelers often compared the prairie to a vast inland ocean. Herman Melville thought it looked like the bed of a dried-up sea, with its undulating grassy billows resembling waves. In his prairie schooner, Lincoln kept sailing into the cold.
So, Sylvia, do you have one more word for us on this book? Something short. Just give me a phrase that you think that sums up this book.
Patriotic. When Widmer wrote of Lincoln coming to Independence Hall in Philadelphia on Washington's birthday and giving a speech about how he hoped to hold the Union together, that moved me to tears.
Lincoln on the Verge charts the 13 days of travel as Lincoln discovers his power, speaks directly to the public, and sees his country up close and personal. And you can have this book today. Here's what Audible has set up for us. They are offering a free audiobook and 30 days to give you the opportunity to check out their service. This includes free access to the Audible Plus catalog, which is updated monthly with new titles. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories. Again, that's audibletrial.com/Ron's Amazing Stories, and you can get Lincoln on the Verge, 13 Days to Washington. Thank you, Audible. And now, it's time for your stories.
These are your stories, sent by you, for you.
We have but one story this week, but it's a good one. It even goes pretty well with our featured story, A Boy in the Basement. It comes from Sonia Norman, who writes to us using the website from Pennsylvania. So before anything, I'm going to confirm that we have at least one ghost in our house. It's a woman, and several neighbors have confirmed seeing her. She's the grandma of my mom's boyfriend, and he's claimed to have felt her as well. Me and my mom have also seen a shadow go from room to the bathroom, and vice versa. With that out of the way, let's begin. It was about 12 a.m., and I had just finished taking a shower. Everyone's asleep. My family, the neighbors, everyone. My entire neighborhood sleeps like a log. I enter my room, which happens to be in the basement, and head towards my bed. Then I hear this woman laugh. It felt like it was right in front of me and sitting on my bed. I thought to myself, okay, no biggie. Maybe she's amused at something. I know she's not inherently harmful. Just overprotective of my mom's boyfriend. So I turned on the bedroom lights and laid down, trying to sleep and act like, well, it didn't happen. Unfortunately, an hour passes and I hadn't fallen asleep. Then I hear my mom's boyfriend wake up and turn on the TV upstairs. I go up and start talking to him about the laugh. He tells me to ignore it and it should be over. We start talking about other experiences we'd had. Then there was a flicker of light on the balcony. That light has been dead for years. It never turns on. I point it out, but we keep talking about past experiences. The light flickers again, and this time I'm a bit more scared, but he laughs it off, saying, "Grandma is just trying to get your goat," and on cue, the light flickered a third time. After a bit, I decided to go back to my room. My body had chills all over, and all I could feel was fear and dread. There was nothing else, just sleepiness and fear. 30 minutes passed, and the chills still hadn't gone away. I looked around the room, knowing that I was not alone. Then, in the corner, a flame starts to flicker. It forms into the shape of a woman, and she starts wagging her finger at me. I'm 23 years old, but I tore out of that room and ran to my mom's bedroom. I jumped into bed with her, and I never left her side for the rest of the night. Now you might ask where the boyfriend slept. Quite honestly, I didn't care. Sonia Norman, Pennsylvania. Well, Sonia, that is quite a story, and I do appreciate you sharing it with us. I'm not sure how I would have handled that situation, but running to Mom is always the safest. Well, that's it for this time. If you have a story that you want to share, like Sonia did, head to the main website at ronsamazingstories.com and click on the story submission banner. Leave your story, give it a title, and tell me where you're from. I'll read it if I can. Our featured story this week is quite special. It comes from the book titled Fractured Souls, More Hauntings at the Peoria State Hospital, and was written by our very own Sylvia Shults. It is a story about her encounter with Christopher, a resident, or a better way of saying it, a frequent visitor of the Pollock Hospital. He comes to the basement there, and this is the story about Sylvia's relationship with his spirit. Now, I couldn't do this without Sylvia's approval, so I say this now. Sylvia, can we play your story?
Absolutely. I would be delighted to have you play it.
What are we about to hear?
We are about to listen to an encounter with a ghost that I actually have a relationship with. This is something very special in the world of paranormal investigation, to make a connection with a spirit that lasts over more than one visit.
Okay then, here is the story titled The Boy in the Basement, and it comes from the book Fractured Souls, written by Sylvia Shults.
The Boy in the Basement. It all started when a friendly ghost wanted to hold my hand. I was at the Pollock Hospital, doing an investigation with Peoria Paranormal. It was at the end of April, so the air in the building still held a bit of a chill. I had ridden my motorcycle to the building that evening, so I was happy to leave my jacket on as we explored. Several of us were downstairs in the first basement room, the large room before the cold storage area. We were standing around in a loose circle, with a spirit box on the floor in the center of the group. We were getting a steady stream of good answers from the spirit box, and we were all jazzed with the way the session was going. For me, it was about to get even better. I was standing there listening to the burping static of the spirit box. I was holding my recorder flat on my right palm, and I wasn't really doing anything with my left hand, it was just down at my side. During the session, though, I became aware of a warmth stealing over the fingers of my left hand. The feeling was soft at first, almost hesitant. It never reached past my fingers. But soon, I was feeling such insistent heat on my fingers that it felt like I was holding my left hand out to the gently glowing coals of a campfire. It was a very cozy feeling, but one that I'd never experienced before. We had a sensitive with us that evening. She was standing across the circle from me, so I called her over to my side of the group. Something weird is going on over here. It's nothing bad, not at all, it's just, I need you to tell me what's going on. She worked her way around the circle and stood close to me. Yeah, there's someone holding your hand, she confirmed. Sylvia, you've got a fan. Just then a yes blurted out of the spirit box. This was way past cool. It was my first time being touched by a ghost, at least the first time I knew about it. And this spirit seemed friendly. I wasn't scared at all, just really intrigued. We asked the ghost its name, and got the response Christopher from the spirit box. All this guy wants is to be in your book, someone behind me muttered. The sensitive concentrated for a moment, then smiled. Actually, yes. That's exactly what he wants. Several months later, in July of that year, I returned to the basement. I had another psychic with me, a photographer from Los Angeles, who had been drawn to the picturesque grandeur of the Bowen building. I invited her to check out the basement as well, and Christina Morris gave us a tour. In the basement, I held my hand out for Christopher to hold. This time I felt a faint warmth, and a tingling in the palm of my hand. Merrily confirmed for me that this was indeed Christopher. Then she gave me a few more details. He's tall, young, I'd say early 20s. He's got dark hair, and he's good looking. Then she said something I was absolutely not expecting to hear. He loves you. Not in a romantic way, she hurried to clarify. You remind him of someone he knew in life. That's why he's attracted to you. For the next few years, I said hello to Christopher whenever I was down in the basement. I always held my hand out for him to hold, since he seemed to enjoy it so much. Sometimes I felt that tingly warmth, sometimes I didn't. But I couldn't stop thinking about the young man whose life had ended far too soon. I wished for a better way to communicate with this amiable spirit. Then one memorable evening I got my wish. In July 2017, American Hauntings put together one of their tours at the Pollock. I showed up, because it's always so much fun to explore the building with people who've never been there before. I scanned the group, and found a familiar face. Diane Lockhart, who shared her experiences with me for Fractured Spirits, was on the tour that night. When we split up into groups for our investigation, I nipped over to Diane's side. "I'm with her," I said firmly. I knew if anyone at the Pollock that night could help me communicate with Christopher, it would be Diane. She is a psychic medium, and one of the most honest, straightforward people I know. Finally, after years of longing, I'd get to talk with the boy in the basement. We made our way downstairs with a few other investigators, all women as it turned out. I sat in one chair, Diane in another, and I gestured to the empty chair on my left. "Christopher, would you like to sit next to me and chat?" I explained to him that Diane could see and hear him, even though I could not. "We can finally have a conversation. I'll ask you questions and Diane will tell me what you said." It still felt very strange to be asking questions of someone I couldn't see. I had to take Diane's word that Christopher had accepted my invitation, and was sitting in the chair next to me. And then I had to keep reminding myself to address my questions to the spirit sitting in that chair. It would admittedly have been rude to invite him to sit down for a conversation, then ignore the fact that he was sitting there. We found out through our conversation that his name was indeed Christopher, but that he preferred to go by Chris. He admitted to being tall and having dark hair, but he said, "Nobody's ever called me handsome before." He also mentioned that the last year he remembered was 1905. Now, this is significant. Remember in the last chapter, when I mentioned the 16 female and 10 male patients who spent the winter of 1906 in the tent colony? Was Chris one of those men? Or maybe, was he one of the 6 patients who survived the winter of 1905 on a cottage porch, or didn't? It's obvious he spent at least one winter in a tent. He clearly described lying in a bed in a tent. He said that if you were in a bed close to the wood-burning stove, it was all right, but if you were farther away, it was really chilly. And Christina Morris, the historian of the asylum, has confirmed that the canvas tents where the tuberculosis patients were housed were indeed heated with stoves. And the wooden floors would have helped to keep the chill down. Chris wouldn't have been aware of Dr. Zeller's administrative decisions to house tuberculosis patients in tent colonies. He would have just lived and died where he was put. We asked him if he knew Dr. Zeller, and he said, he was a nice man. I had to sit for a while and digest that. I was having a casual chat with someone who freaking knew Dr. Zeller, one of my personal heroes. Then Chris said something that absolutely broke my heart. He mentioned the dances that were held on Saturday nights for the patients, but then he added, "We could hear the music coming from the other cottages, but we couldn't go over and dance." It made sense. The tuberculosis patients were in quarantine for a very good reason. It still made me sad, though, to think of this once vibrant young man wasting away with tuberculosis, unable even to enjoy the simple pleasure of a dance with a pretty girl. As I was musing over the unfairness of it all, a few of the other ghost hunters came into the cold storage room. They'd been sitting in the electrical room, and just wanted a change of scenery. One woman went to sit down in the chair next to me, and I stopped her with an outstretched hand. I knew how idiotic it would sound even as I opened my mouth, but the words tumbled out before I could stop them. "Sorry, but someone's already sitting there." The woman gave me a look like I was speaking Swahili. Then Diane burst out laughing. Chris said, "You didn't have to tell her that," she giggled. I gave the chair next to me an arch look. "Cheeky," I teased him with a smile. Can you blame the guy, though? I mean, he's been hanging out at the asylum for well over a century. Then here comes this room full of women, and he can finally communicate with them. At that point, I'd be inviting someone to sit on my lap too. And Chris is a healthy young man. Except for being dead. We caught a very interesting EVP during that first visit with Chris. Diane said, "He's young, about 22, and directly after that, a spirit voice whispered, he was 22. Now at first I thought this was Chris saying, "Guess what? 22, in response to Diane's statement. But other people who have listened to the EVP have pointed out that the voice is not the same as the others. We've gotten several wonderful EVPs from Chris. They say, and after careful consideration I agree with them, that the voice is saying he was 22, and that the voice is female. Chris has mentioned that Rhoda Derry visits the basement sometimes. Was this stray voice Rhoda chiming in to affirm Diane's reading? During that first proper conversation, we also discovered why Chris is so attracted to me. Apparently, I remind him of his sister. He grew up on a farm in Indiana, and was sent to the Peoria State Hospital for some reason, we don't know why, as he didn't tell us. By the next time Diane and I were at the Pollock, several months later in January 2018, I had figured out a gift for Chris, one that might go a long way toward repaying him for the effort it took for him to speak to us. We came downstairs. The group we were with that night was Aaron Shriver's group Supernatural Investigation Crew, and Chris was delighted to see us again. He was still a bit fuzzy on the concept of Diane could see and hear him perfectly well, and I could not. I tried to explain to him that some people have different talents and abilities, some people can play the violin, some people can bake really good bread, some people can build furniture, and some people can see and hear dead folks. Not everyone can do that. He seemed to accept that, but we had to explain it anew on the next visit. I have a surprise for you, Chris, I said once we'd settled down. I'd been ruminating on the pain and boredom and isolation he'd felt as a young man, hearing the cheerful music coming from nearby cottages as the other patients enjoyed their Saturday night dance. I wanted so much to bring him the happy sounds of celebration. I pulled out my phone, I didn't even try to explain that to him, and pulled up a recording I'd made earlier that week. The cheerful sound of a ragtime tune jumped into the air. Diane told me with a puzzled smile, "He's doing something with his hands on his knees. He's doing the Charleston." I gasped. I was thrilled that the music I'd chosen for him had brought him such delight. When the song was over, Diane turned to me. "He says, no one's ever done that for me." There were several other investigators down there with us, a man and a woman I didn't know, and James Barrow. James was recording, and caught a couple of lovely EVPs from Chris. At one point, I held my hand out to the air, and invited Chris to take my hand. "I wish you would take my hand, Chris, because it's January, and it's really cold down here, and when you hold my hand, it's warm and tingly, that's how I know it's you." I didn't feel any warmth that time, so I shoved my hand back into my hoodie pocket. James told me later that he caught an EVP of Chris saying, "Sorry Sylvia, I have no heat." The other investigators conferred in low voices, then the guy spoke up. "Do you think Chris would like to hear a more modern song?" "I don't see why not," I replied. "He seems to like music in general, and he'd probably enjoy the variety." The guy held up his phone, and a peppy pop tune started. Being a child of the 80s, I instantly recognized the brassy saxophone intro to Waiting for a Star to Fall, by Boy Meets Girl. I let out a happy squeal. "Ooh, this is a good one, Chris, you're gonna like it." Later we discovered that James caught another EVP at that point, Chris saying, "I do like it." He also caught the little girl pleading, "I want to sing." Later, more members of Supernatural Investigation Crew came down to the basement. James Barrow came down too. James asked Chris through Diane, "Do you remember me?" And Diane said, "Yes, he definitely remembers you." Bill Topalovic, a member of SICK, spoke up with a sly grin. "Do you remember me, Chris?" I saw him glance at Diane, and I knew his question wasn't so much a question for Chris, as it was a test for Diane. Diane's voice held a little hesitation as she answered for Chris. "He says, you've never been here before." Her voice managed to convey Chris's "Ah, mister, you're putting me on" tone. The truthful answer seemed to satisfy Bill. He tested Diane earlier in the evening, when we were all up in the front hallway taking a break. He made no secret about his skepticism. Bill's a very no-nonsense guy, and I could sense his curiosity about exactly how far Diane's talents could stretch. Over the course of the evening, her quiet confidence spoke volumes. By the end of the evening, the skeptics in the group were, if not convinced, at least quieted. It was near the end of that visit with Chris that he told me something that thrilled me to the core. I was still kind of feeling my way through a conversation with him, via Diane. "I hope this isn't a rude question, and if I'm not supposed to know, feel free not to answer, but, what is it like on your side of the veil?" Diane listened intently, and I could see the other investigators tuning in too. "He says he gets to be with his family, but he can also come here to the asylum." Then he said something I will never forget. "When you get to heaven, I'll be here waiting for you." Just look for the skinny guy with dark hair. Chris was in a delightfully chatty mood when Diane and I visited him in July 2018. He says, "Where have you been, my friend?" Diane said as we walked into the cold storage room. "Oh, Chris, it's good to see you too. I've been working at the library." Then I muttered to Diane, "Where is he, so I can at least face him when I'm talking to him?" "He's over by the pillar," Diane assured me. Then she grinned. "He started laughing when you asked where he was." "Yes, well, you know by now I can't actually see you," I reminded him. "So, Chris, we've just celebrated the 4th of July. How did you celebrate Independence Day in your time?" He says his family lived out in the country, and on the 4th, his father would shoot off a gun. He told us that families' neighbors would get together for a picnic, and the kids would run around and play. He says it was hot. He wished they'd had a creek. Diane hesitated, then went on. He says some creeks had leeches in them. "Yeah, and crawdads." I made a face. "And snakes," Diane supplied. Then she giggled. "He's laughing at us, saying girls." She slipped a bit of teasing disgust into the word. Still smiling, I told Chris, "I have a couple of surprises for you tonight." He says, "Yeah, surprises." He's just been down here with the grouchy old man. Again, I didn't even try to explain how I could make sounds come out of the little rectangle of glass and plastic I held in my hand. "Do you remember when Diane and I were here several months ago, and I asked you to hold my hand?" He says, "It was my pleasure." I felt heat creep onto my cheeks. I grabbed a chair. "Let's sit down for a while, okay? You can join us if you want to." Diane snickered. He says, "You can sit on my lap." Dang, Chris, you are definitely quite the ladies' man, aren't you, even after all this time? I thought back to our first encounter, not our actual first meeting, but the first time Diane was down there to help us talk to each other. That's when I'd found out how cheeky and friendly Chris actually was. That's also when we'd gotten quite a few EVPs from him. I had another important question for him. I played one of the EVPs for him, the one that says he was 22. "Chris, do you know who it was that said this? It doesn't sound like you, it sounds like a woman's voice. Do you know who it was?" Diane listened for Chris's answer. He says it might have been one of the patients. "Can you tell us more?" I pressed. But Diane didn't pick up anything else for a few long moments. Then Chris surprised us. He says, "A lady named Rhoda comes down here. She comes to talk with me." He mentions a few times that she comes down and they talk. So the speaker on that EVP could have been Rhoda. I was so stoked to hear that two of my favorite spirits know each other. I decided it was time to give Chris the next surprise I had planned for him. "Chris, I taught myself an actual ragtime dance." I hesitated, suddenly shy. I love dancing, but not with a partner. I always feel like a total goober when I try to dance with someone else. "Do you want to dance with me?" Diane said. "He stood up, and he's holding his hand out to you. I guess he wants to dance." Well, I had my answer, and I couldn't very well back out at that point. I took a deep breath, hit play on the recorder on my phone, and walked to the middle of the basement and got ready to dance. With a partner I couldn't see. What was I thinking? At one point, the castle dance calls for both partners to spin. The woman, of course, spins backward. I, of course, spun forward. Because I'm a dork. From across the room, Diane called, "He says you're trying to lead." To my chagrin, I realized I was doing exactly that. "Sorry," I fumbled and reversed. I managed to get through the rest of the dance without any more mishaps. I hope I didn't step on Chris's toes. The music stopped, the dance ended, and I breathed a huge sigh of relief. "Did you like that, Chris?" He said you did very well, even though you tried to lead. Diane smiled to take the sting out of her words. He added, "What do you expect? You taught yourself." I didn't get a sense that he was being mean or petty with those words. He was just being kind, even understanding. Chris must have asked for another dance at that point, because Diane told him, "She doesn't want to dance anymore, she's tired." "I'm not tired," I corrected her. I turned to Chris. "I'm not tired. I'm just a bit embarrassed about mucking up the dance steps. Do you truly seriously want to dance with me again?" I'm not all that good of a dancer, as you can tell. Diane shrugged. He says, let's dance some more. So I called up the music for the castle dance again, and once more I did my best to stumble gracefully through the steps, being careful to go backwards when the spin came around again. I felt self-conscious, but like a good partner, Chris put me at my ease once the dance was over. That was a big joy for him, he says, because he was sick and couldn't go to the dances. Well, of course I just couldn't dwell on my clumsy embarrassment then. At least I can dance whenever I feel like it. I sat back down next to the empty chair I had left for him, and invited him to hold my hand again. I put my hand out, palm down. I usually offer Chris my hand palm up. Immediately I felt warmth on my palm again, a sure physical sign of Chris's attention. Diane quietly translated for him. Why wouldn't I like holding your hand? You're a pretty lady. I felt a surge of warmth in my hand. That boy is quite the charmer, no matter that he's been dead for over a century. As Chris held my hand, we continued our conversation. He confirmed for us that he was at the asylum, suffering from tuberculosis for a couple of years. So he did survive the winter of 1905. It's possible he passed sometime during the winter of 1906, but we don't know that for sure. He spoke of the tent being hot in the summer, and heated by the wood-burning stove in the winter. He said he and the other patients did get to walk around outside in good weather. I marveled aloud that he and I had walked virtually the same ground. Yes, Chris replied, but it looks a lot different now. I could understand that. In my time, the hospital sits on that piece of land. In his time, the white canvas of the tent colony snapped in the passing breeze on the very same spot. To my delight, Chris remembered the zoo on the grounds. When Dr. Zeller arrived at the asylum to step into his superintendent position, he found the place furnished with all the trappings of a mental institution of that time, which meant grates of metal bars on the windows. Dr. Zeller ordered those grates removed. He refused to make his patients feel like they were living in cages. He took those metal grates and repurposed them into the enclosure for a zoo on the grounds. Chris said it was like a petting zoo, with sheep and goats and chickens, lots of chickens. As we sat chatting, Diane and I kept hearing a soft noise down along the basement walls, like a faint scritching. Diane gave a dainty shudder. Ghosts don't bother me, but I don't like mice. Chris saw his opportunity for another bit of teasing. A mouse is gonna run up your pants leg. I could just picture a school-age Chris sitting behind a girl with long braids, just so he could slyly dip the ends of those braids in the inkwell. We asked him about school. We found out that he didn't go to school regularly. The one-room schoolhouse was a long way from where he lived, and sometimes he had to stay home and help with work on his family's farm. What did you want to be when you grew up? I heard the resigned shrug in Diane's voice as she answered for him. Dad said, you're going to be a farmer. You're going to take over the land, and farm the land. Chris seemed a bit glum when talking about the duties his father had laid out for him. Hey, it's not such a bad thing making things grow, I said. I told him about the fruit and vegetables I raise in my backyard garden. This seemed to cheer him up. You sound like a farmer girl, he kidded. Oh no. No. I know there's a big difference between farming and gardening. Chris told us about playing in the corn, and how it would make him itch. He spoke of playing in the barn, and how wild cats would make their homes and have their kittens in the barn. The conversation turned to backyard critters, and he told us how the marauding raccoons would waddle through the fields and eat their corn. Some things don't change, even after 100 years and more. I don't know why I'm the only one, Chris blurted out as our conversation wound down. What did he mean by this? He wouldn't say. Did he mean that he was the only one out of his family able to come back for visits to familiar places? Did he maybe mean that he was the only one of his family to die so young? That's a sobering thought, but again, he refused to elaborate. He threw in another tidbit about himself, though, just before we left the basement. Out of the blue, Chris shared something with Diane regarding the lost little girl's spirit who shares the basement with the other entities. Some of the things Chris says can be a bit cryptic, but this was quite clear. The girl doesn't know where to go, so he comes back to see her, Diane said. They say the good die young. So what do we know about Chris, apart from what Diane has been able to share with me? Sadly, not much. I asked him what his last name was. Diane hesitated. She wasn't getting anything from him right away. I said sympathetically, "Has it been that long, that you don't remember?" James Barrow's recorder came up with a soft EVP, "I remember." He finally gave us the last name Pearson or Peterson. Either way, the last name that he gave us was something that could be spelled half a dozen ways, most of which I tried on both Ancestry.com and Find a Grave. Nothing came up. He did tell us that his body had been sent back to his family. They must have been devastated to lose a son and brother so young. Here's another inescapable heartbreak. Chris probably suffered from some sort of mental illness. The Peoria State Hospital did treat people from the community and surrounding towns for tuberculosis, but only about 10% of the tuberculosis patients were local. Since Chris was from Indiana, that means his family sent him to the asylum because he was having mental issues. The Peoria State Hospital was famous worldwide for its exemplary care of the mentally ill. It was not a renowned tuberculosis sanatorium like Waverly Hills. Treatment of tuberculosis was secondary to the treatment of mental illness. And remember, in those early days the state hospital was still called by its original name, which was the Illinois Asylum for the Incurable Insane, an atrocious name that Dr. Zeller got changed as soon as possible. So, Chris developed tuberculosis at the asylum, and died here sometime soon after 1905. He was treated for tuberculosis for at least 1 year, because he has described the tent arrangement in both summer and winter conditions. We have no idea when he got here, or how long he was treated for whatever mental illness brought him to the Peoria State Hospital in the first place. This presents the question, what was Chris's diagnosis? I have no idea. Diane says that sometimes when she asks him a question, he seems confused, or slow to respond. He doesn't ever seem agitated or dangerous though. He's told us that he can go back and forth between this plane of existence and the other side. I like to think that since he's not an earthbound spirit, maybe whatever issues he had in life have been healed. All I know is that whenever I visit Chris, I'm charmed all over again. I know he's been dead for well over a century. But Chris seems very much alive to me. Except, he's invisible. And he seems to enjoy my company too. The last time I was down in the basement with Diane, Chris said to me, "Where have you been, my friend?" I asked Diane flat out where Chris was, so I could face him as I talked, because no, I still can't see him for myself. She said, "He's over there by the pillar." He started laughing when you asked where he was.
I was quite taken by this story, and I knew that I had to play it for you. They say that a story is only as good as its proof. Well, this one comes with some very credible evidence. Sylvia, what is the first thing that we're going to hear that goes with this story?
The first thing we're going to listen to is my very first encounter with Chris. We were standing in the basement of the Pollock, and I noticed that something was odd, so I had to bring it to people's attention. This is what we're going to hear.
All right, well, we are going to play the first encounter with Chris. It took place on April 21st, 2012.
Oh, wow.
Come on up and speak right into my box that I got in my hand here.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine. It's just like something, my hand is warm. Really? Yeah, my left hand.
Oh, it's definitely hand warm.
It's like something warm is holding my hand. That is so cool.
Oh my gosh.
I've never been touched before. I think this might be it because it feels like something warm is holding my hand. Mm-hmm. And it's not a breeze. It's just like something warm around my hand. This is cool. This is totally awesome.
Can you tell me your name, please?
Were you just holding somebody's hand?
Stacy, can you tell me what's going on here? Because this is wonderful. Is someone holding my hand? I really want to know.
One second. It's hard to say. Hold on.
It's like this warm pulsing on my fingers.
I'm not focusing on it. I'm just focusing on something else.
Sorry. I'd really love to know.
I'm kind of disappointed that my buddy's not coming out to say hi to me.
Now it's fading.
Wasn't a little girl, it was a man.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. This was the man. Oh,
No,
my.
The little girl's voice was on the thing. It said stop.
Do you want me to stop?
He said, friend?
Now it's back. It's fainter than it was.
From getting away from me.
Do you know what my name is?
You have a family.
That is so cool.
Sorry, Dave. I'm trying to hear.
He's gonna go away because I was doing that.
Oh.
How many spirits are down here with us?
Yeah, it's much fainter than it was.
10?
Wow.
Yep. 10.
10. Yep.
10. Yep. 10.
Thank you.
Sylvia, that's impressive. There's no other way to put it. That is truly impressive. And you immersed us in it, so I felt like I was there with you. And what was it like? I mean, what was it really like having that hand warm up?
It was absolutely amazing. I was not a very experienced ghost hunter at that time, so I really had not much of an idea what was going on, but I could tell that the connection was being made. And that first experience let me know what to expect from further encounters with Chris. And now I know what his touch feels like.
Well, I know that you mentioned in the story that there was an EVP about a woman saying something. Do you remember what that was? It was like 22, or what was it?
We captured a woman's voice saying he was 22. We've analyzed this, and it's obviously not Chris speaking. It's a different voice, and it seems to be a female voice. There is a tenuous connection pointed out by the psychic mediums that it might possibly be Rhoda Derry speaking, saying he was 22. They seem to have a connection. The mediums tell me that Rhoda and Chris have a connection, and they're both on the other side, so why not? So I like to think that it might very well be Rhoda Derry saying he was 22.
All right, well, let's listen to it.
Yeah, I'd say about 22, but...
Well, to me, it's definitely saying something like he was 22 or he is 22. That's clear. All right, well, we got another clip here. And this one is, I think the scene is this is where you're sitting with the medium and someone wants to walk up and sit down. Is that right?
This was my very first time actually speaking with Chris through a psychic medium. So it was great to have a conversation with him. And it was my first inkling of how cheeky Chris can be. He is very much a red-blooded young man.
And again, Chris, I'm looking at the chair you're sitting in, but if my gaze is kind of unfocused, I apologize because I wish I could see you.
He's still sitting there.
Okay.
He's talking about showing me corn. So they had corn and how tall the corn would get. And,
okay.
Yeah, another fantastic clip, and very immersive. We've got one more clip to go with this story, and I think this one is your absolute favorite. Set it up for us, will you, Sylvia?
Oh, Ron, this is my favorite. This meant so much to me to have Chris say this to me. One of the reasons we do paranormal investigation is to find out if there is something after death. And most investigators find it very comforting to know that, and to have someone actually say that, yes, there is something and I will be there, is just precious beyond measure.
Well, let's listen to that clip.
you have to touch her to let her know where you are.
Yeah.
If you touch her on the arm or the hand, then she'll know where you're at.
The arm, that's fine. If you want to stroke my hair, if you want to touch my hair to let me know that you're around, that's completely fine with me. Because once Diane goes, I won't know unless you touch me.
Deal? So when she comes back again, you touch her to let her know you're standing by her.
I would like that very much. To know for sure that you're here.
And you don't have to stand off in the corner because none of the other people can see you either.
Oh yeah, you can wander around.
You can walk all around and nobody can see you.
You could probably, you may have somebody sit on your lap again.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Like that one lady.
That was so funny.
That was funny. Boy, she just hopped up really quick. Nobody can see you but me, so you can walk all around or sit down or dance, talk. Well, I don't know why I'm the only one.
Yeah, I wish I could. I really wish I could. I'll just have to wait until I pass over, and then I will get to see you as clearly as you can see me right now.
Yeah.
I'm holding you to that. You promised that you'd be waiting for me.
That he would come up and say something to you.
Yeah. You promised you'd wait for me there, and I'm going to hold you to that.
Well, Sylvia, I know that we've been friends a long time, but I got to say thank you for letting us play this wonderful chapter from your book. It is my favorite thing you've ever written.
Thank you very much for helping me get this story out to people. People really respond to Chris's story. I've had many people say, wow, I wish I could have an experience like you did with the connection with this spirit. And I just say, keep your eyes open, keep your senses open, and maybe you'll have that connection yourself one day. And it's such an amazing thing when it happens.
Well, I guess the last question I have for you, Sylvia, is if somebody wants to read this book, what do they got to do?
Well, they can go to Amazon.com or bookshop.org and order Fractured Souls. They can read it for themselves there. And you can also listen to it on Audible. It is available as an audiobook.
All right, then. Well, I want to thank you for letting us do this. And I want to thank you for taking a few minutes today and talking to us about Fractured Souls. It is an incredible story.
Well, thank you for helping me bring this story to more people. It is my pleasure and my privilege to share the stories, the history, and the hauntings of the Peoria State Hospital.
Thank you, Sylvia.
Thanks, Ron.
You worked too hard, you ate too much, the cheesecake made you greedy. Let your aching head and stomach hear this message from old Speedy. Alka-Seltzer, plop, plop, fizz, fizz, oh, what a relief it is. Plop, plop, fizz, fizz, oh, what a relief it is. Ah, those Speedy Alka-Seltzer bubbles burst into action to relieve your upset stomach and aching head fast. Use only as directed. Oh, what a relief it is. What a relief.
That was episode number 508, and they just keep rolling in. This time, Sylvia Shults and Sonia Norman helped us out, and I surely do thank them for it. Such good stories. If you want to follow the podcast or the blog, head to ronsamazingstories.com. There you will find any of the links I mentioned and how to contact us. Do you want to help the show? The best thing you can do is to tell your friends all about it, and please leave reviews or feedback wherever you listen. Clicking that follow or like button makes us grow. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come again to find out what are Ron's Amazing Stories.